Do you remember way at the beginning of the book, at the preface, he had met with William and Charles at Frogmore Gardens. Okay. Frogmore Gardens continues. This is the back end of that conversation that we had begun with. Okay, so it's hours after Grandpa's funeral. He's been walking with Willie and Pa. They are not getting it. They don't understand why he went to California. It's like, in his mind, it's all just willful ignorance. Like, how could you guys not know why I left? And they don't. And, okay, let me just say this too before I really get into the story. I was reading it last night, and I, was genuinely brought to tears because it was so sad to me to see William at the end of the story. William is fighting for Harry to hear him. And I can't promise I won't tear up again. Probably won't, because I'll be doing Harry's voice, so that how you can't be crying and be doing that voice at the same time. But when I was reading it on my own last night in the bed, I had to put the book down, and I don't know, maybe I'm hormonal, I'm not sure, but I just felt so sad to see one brother fighting so hard for his other brother. Ugh, painful. Okay, anyway, so they've gone around in circles, nobody's understanding each other, but then he says, and the thing that enraged Harry so much was that their willful ignorance, why are they acting like they don't get this? And then he was also mad because he said they hadn't even asked about Meg. But they were both keen to know how the lawsuit was going, even though it was Meg's lawsuit, so why didn't they ask about her? He claims it's because the lawsuit directly affected them. Okay, and this is the thing I don't understand. He's so offended that they're only concerned about it because it has to do with them. They're not allowed to have any self-interest. They can't be concerned about the things that concern them. And yet he can be colossally self-interested and self-consumed by ruining his grandfather's funeral, by saying, hey, we're all here to grieve Grandpa, but I gotta catch a plane, so I'm gonna need you guys to meet me out at Frogmore Gardens and rehash all this trash because, you're just not hearing me. So it's okay for him to completely monopolize the situation and the horrible tragedy that they've all come together for. It's okay for him to just continually talk about himself, but they can't question him about this lawsuit that has to do with them. Okay. Always so hypocritical. Okay, so Pa's just look, why is it still going? It's just a suicide mission. Nothing's going to come of it. And, Harry just all the day long playing, the noble put upon soldier he's just on a journey for right. He says that, that might be what you think, Pa, but I've got to prove that these people are liars. I have hard evidence. It's like, okay, do you though? If you do, we would love to see it. Because I think it's just that people don't like the paparazzi. People would side with him if he could prove his point, but the thing is he can't. He says, it wasn't about me, it was a matter of public interest. And Pa just, shaking his head, he's like, look, Pa says that he would admit that the journalists are the scum of the earth. That was apparently his phrase. But, and Harry snorts. There was always a but with him when it came to the press because he hated their hate. But oh, how he loved their love. Now Harry goes into, after that outrageously disrespectful statement, he goes into this pseudo-psychology, little therapy, and he thinks he can be a psychiatrist. He goes, deprived of love as a boy, bullied by schoolmates, he was dangerously, compulsively drawn to the elixir that the press offered him. What? That's so, I just can't even imagine saying that about my dad, especially a man who has not actively wronged him. Okay, I get the whole thing with Camilla. I can totally see that would be really, really, really frustrating as a young man and as a child to see your dad with another woman. I get that. But I also think that is just at the ages that we are, you can't still be, you've got to get past it. Against all odds, things have turned out okay. And I just can't fathom where he gets off being so disrespectful. Oh yeah, you would court the press. You're just such a pathetic human being. You need their attention. But Pa is trying to express to him, he's like, look, the thing is that the press is going to demonize you all the time. They're just going to do it. You just have to get over it. But he's like, look at Grandpa. He could do nothing right. But now that he's dead, now he can do nothing wrong. They're not people to be relied on. But all Harry can hear is, oh, so I've got to wait until I'm dead before anybody cares about me. And Pa says, but if you would just endure it, darling boy, for a little while, in a funny way, they would respect you for it. And it's so true, because you look at the way the whole royal family has conducted themselves through the smear campaign of Harry and Meghan, and who do we respect? Do we respect the people who are slinging mud in the streets, or do we respect the people who are in their quiet and dignified way saying, it's fine, you don't have anything to say. We're not going to dignify that foolishness with a response. And those are the people we respect. Okay, but look at these fighting words. Here Harry comes in swinging. Speaking of taking things personally, I told them I might learn to endure the press and even forgive their abuse. I might, if my own family hadn't been so complicit. And that was going to take longer to get over. Pa's office, Willie's office, enabled these fiends, if not outright collaborated with them. Okay, and he says that just recently, allegations that Meg had been a bully had come out. It was their latest vicious campaign. It was just so shocking and so egregious. And Meg and he had to demolish the lie by submitting a 25-page evidence-filled report to Human Resources that said she had not bullied people. Have we seen that report? What report is that? I don't remember clapping eyes on any 25-page report. Admittedly, I haven't gone digging for it. I'm sure Tom Bauer will inform us of all things fact-related when we get to that. Pa stepped back. Willie shook his head. You know, they're both talking over each other, and they've said it 100 times. Harry, you are delusional. None of us are feeding these stories to the press. In fact, when were these leaks beginning to happen? That's what we would all like to know. Oh, about the time Meghan joined the family. But Harry remains steadfast. You people are the delusional ones. He says that even for the sake of argument, even if he tried to pretend that Willie and Pa hadn't really been kicking him under the bus all these times, their silence was violence. Here it was that his wife had been suffering at the hands of the press. And, well, they wouldn't say anything about it. And that silence was damning. So it didn't really matter if they hadn't fed things to the press. Their whole conduct with the press had been unimpressive. And Pa says to him, again, very seriously, you've got to understand the institution doesn't tell the press what to write. We don't have that right. And thank God they don't, because here's the thing. Today, there might be people in power who you don't care what they tell the media to do, right? That's it's a safety measure that those in power can't tell the press what to write. Because tomorrow it might be some tyrant who's in charge. And then when they get to tell the media what to say, then where are you going to be? You don't want the media to be able to be bossed by those in power. But that's not the way Harry feels about it. Harry's always said, he's never understood our First Amendment right here in the United States, and he certainly wouldn't understand that in England when they have no First Amendment right. In his mind, those in power get to tell the people what to do. So Harry writes, again, I yelped with laughter. It was like Pa saying he couldn't just tell his valet what to do. But even Harry has said earlier in the book, we couldn't control these ghouls. There was nothing we could do. So why are you now shocked that there's nothing Pa can do? Okay, so then William steps in. And William says, look, I think it's really rich that you're over here telling us about colluding with the press when you just got done having an extended interview with Oprah. You want to tell us how that wasn't you colluding with the press to get your narrative out there? Harry concedes that a month earlier, he and Meg had done an interview with Oprah Winfrey. But let him remind you that right days before it had aired, the stories about how Meghan was a bully had come out. So, proving his point, Pa and Willie's office had found out he was going to be on Oprah and decided to do a little of their own mudslinging. How dare they? And he says that, the reason they'd done it is that since leaving Britain, the attacks on he and Meg had been increasing exponentially. They had to do something to make it stop. And silence wasn't working. It was only making it worse. They felt they had no choice. This is always the refrain of the ever addicted attention seeker. You do have a choice. You just don't like the choices, but you have a choice to be quiet. However, after the interview had aired, several people had reached out to him, and they were none too pleased with what he'd done. Several close friends. One of Hugh and Emily's sons had come out and said, "What are you doing?" Emily herself had said, this is shocking. I don't know what you're doing. Even Tiggy had chastised him for the Oprah interview. Thank God there were some people in his life who were like, what the hell was that? How could you reveal such things about your own family? And here we have the junkiest excuse you've ever heard. He says, I told them I failed to see how speaking to Oprah was any different from what my family and their staffs had done for decades. Okay, but then you were not above it then. You don't get to now act holier than thou. You're involved in the same things that you say have been so problematic. If feeding things to the press is what keeps the beast going, then you don't feed things to the press. You don't get to say your behavior is disgusting, so to prove that it's disgusting, I'm also going to be disgusting. That is the action of such an immature person. It's kind of like when you see in like these extremist feminist movements, how they say, men are disgusting pigs who just sleep around and, abuse women and talk horribly about women, and they're the absolute animals. And then you see these women acting like it's liberation to sleep around and speak unkindly about men and act like they're just the scourge of the earth. It's like, you're not making your point, though, by acting exactly like them. And that's how I feel about this. You are not making your point by acting exactly like them. If you think that that's really what's going on and you have always found it problematic, why then would you engage in behavior that you say has been destructive for years? It's not going to be different when you do it. Okay, so that is like the lamest excuse I've ever heard. He says that they chosen an interviewer who was above reproach, and they didn't hide behind phrases like the palace sources. They let people see the words coming out of their mouths. You effing didn't, though. What about when you slung mud and said that there was a racist in the family, but you wouldn't name who the racist was? Don't even with that. Then he says that he was just sick and tired of the whole conversation. They didn't get it. He didn't want to talk to them about it. He tried to say goodbye, take care, good luck, whatever, I'm out. But then Willie, who he says was really steaming, was shouting things. And he says that if things were this bad as Harry made them out to be, then it was Harry's fault for not asking for help. Why didn't he just ask for some help? And Harry completely resents him. But William is like, you never came to us. You never came to me. Why do you come to me and say you needed help? You know I would have helped you. And Harry says, well, since boyhood that had been Willie's position on everything. I must come to him pointedly, directly, formally, on my knees. Otherwise, no aid from the heir. And I wondered why I should have to ask my brother to help me when my wife and I were in peril. If I were being mauled by a bear and he saw, would he wait for us to ask for help? That's so overdramatic, Harry. That's so overdramatic. If you're being mauled by a bear, you're not, though. It's just so dramatic. Okay, this is the part that's truly tragic. He says that he mentioned the Sandringham agreement. He says he'd asked for William's help right then and there, but the agreement was violated. It was shredded. They'd stripped him of everything, and William hadn't even lifted a finger. And William says, that was Granny. Take it up with Granny. I didn't do that. Harry waved a hand, but William lunged and grabbed his shirt. Listen to me, Harold. Listen to me. I pulled away, refusing to meet his gaze. He forced me to look into his eyes. Listen to me, Harold. Listen. I love you, Harold. I want you to be happy. The words flew out of my mouth. Well, I love you too, but your stubbornness is extraordinary. And yours isn't? I pulled away again. He grabbed me again, twisting me to maintain eye contact. Harold, you guys, this is where I started to cry. Harold, you must listen to me. I want you to be happy. Harold, I swear. I swear on Mummy's life. He stopped. I stopped. Pa stopped. He'd gone there. He'd used the secret code, the universal password. Ever since we were boys, those 3 words were to be used only in times of extreme crisis. On Mummy's life. For nearly 25 years, we'd reserved that soul-crushing vow for times when one of us needed to be heard, to be believed, quickly. For times when nothing else would do. And it stopped me cold as it was meant to, not because he'd used it, but because it didn't work. I simply didn't believe him, and I didn't trust him fully. And vice versa. He saw it too. He saw that we were in a place of such hurt and doubt that even those sacred words couldn't set us free. How lost we are, I thought, how far we've strayed, how much damage has been done to our love, our bond, and why. And then Harry chalks it up to being the mob and of the press, and it just, no, it isn't them. He says, why has this happened? Because Meghan, you nitwit. Because Meghan, she is the one. She's the one that is behind all of this. You and William might have had your, normal sibling rivalries that would have been exacerbated by the titles that you both held. But even so, it was never like this. It was never like this. And for you not to be able to hear him crying out to you, I want you to be happy. I want you to be happy. I want this for you. Just listen to me. For you not to be able to hear the pain that he's in. Like, where are you, Harry? Where are you? Have you become so entrenched in this lie, so invested in this narrative that the world is against you, that you can't hear the pain in your own brother's voice? Only your pain matters? It's pathetic. And then he goes on this enormously long story about how he was flooded with this memory of he and William, when they had been in Spain, they'd gone on a hunting trip. They were hunting partridges, and they'd both done really well on this hunt. And when it was over, they'd stood up and hugged each other, like really hugged each other. And they were just so jubilant about how, like, they just had such a good time. And he writes, and this is ridiculous, he says that now, and now I saw that even our finest moments and my best memories somehow involve death. Our lives are built on death, our brightest days shadowed by it. Looking back, I didn't see spots of time, but dances with death. I saw how we steeped ourselves in it. We christened and crowned and graduated and married and passed out and passed over our beloved's bones. Windsor Castle itself is a tomb, the walls filled with our ancestors, and the Tower of London was held together with the blood of animals used by the original builders 1,000 years ago to temper the mortar between the bricks. Outsiders called us a cult, but maybe we were a death cult, and wasn't that a little bit more depraved? Even after laying Grandpa to rest, had we not had our fill? Why were we here lurking along the edge of that undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns? I just think that that's the most overdramatic statement I think I've ever read, even in this book. And quite frankly, I mean, I've said that about him. I've said that I think that his greatest moments do tend to be rather dark. Like, he seems to like that. But I think it's because he doesn't know how to feel subtle emotion. If it isn't either great joy or great depression, this is not a state of being that he seems to be familiar with. He cannot just be. There has to be a crisis, there has to be joy or a crisis, joy or a crisis. Otherwise, he's not sure what to do with it. I've said that I think that's true about him, but I don't think that that is true about the family as a whole. And I think, and somebody said this in the comments, I think Harry is an unbelievable projector. And somebody was saying in the comments that if you took everything that he says in this book about everybody else and then applied it to who he is as a person, it's actually really insightful. But the thing is that everything he's saying is about everybody else. And this is like a case study in projection. He definitely does seem to have that really juvenile relationship with pain. Like, when you're a teenager and everything is just so, like, every emotion is just so heavy, and like every emotion is just like when you're sad, you're like devastated. When you're happy, you're so beyond elated. Like, as an adult, you've never been as happy as you were like when you were happy as a teenager. It's like everything is just like these highs and lows and highs and lows. And that's where he is. I mean, he's just such an immature man.